Susan Sowerby went round their garden with them, and she was told the whole story of it, and shown every bush and tree which had come alive. Colin walked on one side of her, and Mary on the other. Each of them kept looking up at her comfortable rosy face, secretly curious about the delightful feeling she gave them, a sort of warm, supported feeling. It seemed as if she understood them as Dickon understood his creatures. She stooped over the flowers and talked about them as if they were children. Soot followed her and once or twice cawed at her and flew upon her shoulder as if it were Dickon's. When they told her about the robin and the first flight of the young ones, she laughed a motherly little mellow laugh in her throat. I suppose learning 'em to fly is like learning children to walk. But I'm feared I should be all in a worrit if mine had wings instead of legs, she said. It was because she seemed such a wonderful woman in her nice moorland cottage way that at last she was told about the magic. "Do you believe in magic?" asked Colin, after he had explained about Indian fakirs. "I do hope you do." "That I do, lad," she answered. "I never knowed it by that name, but what does the name matter? I warrant they call it a different name in France and a different one in Germany. The same thing as set the weeds swelling and the sun shining made thee well, lad, and it's a good thing. It isn't like us poor fools as thinks it matters if us is called out of our names. The big good thing doesn't stop to worry, bless thee. It goes on making worlds by the million, worlds like us. Never thee stop believing in the big good thing, and knowing the world's full of it, and call it what thou likes. Thou wert singing to it when I come into the garden." "Oh, I felt so joyful," said Colin, opening his beautiful strange eyes at her. "Suddenly I felt how different I was, how strong my arms and legs were, you know, and how I could dig and stand. And I jumped up and I wanted to shout out something to anything that would listen." "The magic listened when they sung the doxology." "It would have listened to anything that sung. It was the joy that mattered. Eh, lad, what's names to the joy maker?" And she gave his shoulders a quick, soft pat again. She had packed a basket which held a regular feast this morning, and when the hungry hour came and Dickon brought it out from its hiding place, she sat down with them under their tree and watched them devour their food, laughing and quite gloating over their appetites. She was full of fun and made them laugh at all sorts of odd things. She told them stories in broad Yorkshire and taught them new words. She laughed as if she could not help it when they told her of the increasing difficulty there was in pretending that Colin was still a fretful invalid. "You see, we can't help laughing nearly all the time when we're together," explained Colin. "And it doesn't sound ill at all. We try to choke it back, but it will burst out, and that sounds worse than ever. There's one thing that comes into my mind so often," said Mary, "and I can scarcely ever hold in when I think of it suddenly. I keep thinking, suppose Colin's face should get to look like a full moon. It isn't like one yet, but he gets a tiny bit fatter every day. And suppose some morning it should look like one, what should we do?" "Bless us all, I can see there is a good bit of play acting to do," said Susan Sowerby. "Oh, but they won't have to keep it up much longer. Master Craven'll come home." "Do you think he will?" asked Colin. "Why?" Susan Sowerby chuckled softly. I suppose it'd nigh break their heart if he found out before they told him in their own way, she said. There's laid awake nights planning it. I couldn't bear anyone else to tell him, said Colin. I think about different ways every day. I think now I just want to run into his room. That'd be a fine start for him, said Susan Sowerby. I'd like to see his face, lad, I would that. He mun come back, that he mun. One of the things they talked of was the visit they were to make to her cottage. They planned it all. They were to drive over the moor and lunch out of doors among the heather. They would see all the 12 children and Dickon's garden and would not come back until they were tired. Susan Sowerby got up at last to return to the house and Mrs. Medlock. It was time for Colin to be wheeled back also. But before he got into his chair, he stood quite close to Susan and fixed his eyes on her with a kind of bewildered adoration, and he suddenly caught hold of the fold of her blue cloak and held it fast. You are just what I wanted, he said. I wish you were my mother, as well as Dickon's. All at once, Susan Sowerby bent down and drew him with her warm arms close against the bosom under the blue cloak, as if he had been Dickon's brother. The quick mist swept over her eyes. Dear lad, she said, thy own mother's in this here very garden, I do believe. She couldn't keep out of it. Thy father must come back to see thee, he mun.